Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Coffee Chat. Tom here. This week I'm sat here with Matt and we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about plant-based nutrition primarily, but also Matt's going to kind of share maybe a bit of his own kind of personal story around kind of how nutrition impacts some of his health factors and a few things like that really. So going to dive straight in. Just going to get Matt to just tell us a little bit more about maybe his background in nutrition, where he's come from to where he's at now, and what the role that plays in his everyday life. So Matt, over to you. Kick us off.
Nice one, thanks, Tom. Everyone that knows me probably knows me as kind of a fairly small built guy, but it would probably kind of surprise you to hear that the amount of calories I consume is pretty high for how big I am. And I think that's always been kind of linked to the fact that I'm vegetarian, and so people assume that because you're vegetarian, you're small. And so that's been kind of my kind of challenge over the past, 28 years, to try and kind of dispel that myth. I've been vegetarian for around 27 years, and for about 6 or 9 months, I've now been plant-based, which kind of coincided with Game Changers, the documentary coming out, where you can kind of see how some kind of real life athletes are able to perform at a really high level on a plant-based diet. And so I figured I was next in line for Game Changers 2.
That's cool. That's great. What I really liked there was that you used the term plant-based, and I think sometimes in the world of nutrition, it's very easy to kind of just go all in terms of like a certain camp. Like people will describe themselves by the diet they have. Whether I'm vegan or I'm keto or whatever. And we like the term plant-based eating because it's a little bit more, I don't know, kind of open for interpretation, and that's cool. And I think sometimes with diets, we'd rather kind of people be a little bit more flexible, but still focus on like a food first approach. Just because a product has the word vegan on it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be any healthier than like the alternative that it's trying to replace. Like a vegan brownie is still a brownie, and has the same number of calories, if not more, than the kind of non-plant-based version. So we would always encourage people to still have a food first approach, but I like the term plant-based because the majority of what, when we're eating generally quite healthy, is plants anyway. Whether we're eating, whole grains, whether we're eating, beans and lentils, whether we're eating fruits and vegetables, like it's all plants. It's just that, some people maybe have a different source of protein on the plate, whether they have meat. Some people might be maybe pescatarian, they use fish. Some people will go plant-based. We work with a lot of people who will kind of do a combination of all three, and that's really great. There's loads of benefits to doing that as well. So if anyone's kind of sat there maybe thinking about, I've seen a bit of this, or I've heard a bit of that about being vegetarian or plant-based, or from your perspective, Matt, as someone who practice that regularly, what are your challenges that you find? Now, obviously, right now, the world's a little bit different, but in a normal world, whether that's at work or at home or socially, were there any kind of challenges you found with transitioning into a plant-based diet?
Yeah, I mean, probably number one was cheese. Being vegetarian growing up, we kind of always used cheese as like one of the main sources of protein, I guess. And so, just having those everyday things that you don't really think about, like, well, I guess you do think about having cheese on a pizza, but kind of when it's kind of so ingrained in your kind of daily practice of eating, that was like really one of the biggest things I missed. I think probably more on a holistic sense, just eating enough calories is always an issue when you're eating more kind of nutrient dense, but maybe calorie deficient foods, which obviously if we're eating more whole grain and more kind of natural stuff, it is usually a little less calorie dense. So that's always been an issue. I think kind of socially, it hasn't been such a problem for me because I've always grown up being vegetarian. It's never been kind of something where you feel like people are judging you, or maybe I do. Maybe I subliminally have felt it for the whole of my life. But yeah, the social side hasn't been such an issue for me. I guess if you were transitioning maybe from a pretty meat-heavy diet, then you may kind of experience these things that people think, "Oh, why are you doing this?" or whatever. But yeah, that's not really been an issue for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think if people are thinking about you know, plant-based diet as well, and maybe about trying these things out, we would always recommend is take meals that you already eat, and you know, kind of swap and transition things so that you know you're not having to go out and buy a whole cupboard full of new ingredients. You know, suddenly, you know, we see that a lot where people are starting a new diet and they get a recipe book and they're going out and buying all these new ingredients. Takes them really long to cook and prepare it, and they kind of like lose the enjoyment factor out of it. So it could be really simple as, you know, you're going to have I don't know, like a chili or a bolognese, and you're going to swap the mince. And like say with something like cheese, obviously there are plant-based alternatives for cheese. A lot of them are made with like coconut, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, they're pretty high. You definitely don't get the same kind of like macro split as you would
Mm.
with regular cheese, right? So it's usually pretty high in fat, pretty high in salt, and then the rest is usually water. So it's not the kind
Yeah,
of, at least with regular cheese, you can kind of say, "Oh, I'm hitting some kind of macros," but
yeah,
yeah, the vegan cheese doesn't really do it on that
yeah.
sense.
Do you use nutritional yeast at all?
Uh, we've got a tub of nutritional yeast, and I'll sometimes try and hide it in a few meals, but it it really looks like fish flakes. So unless you can kind of get past the visuals of it and
Yeah.
realize that you're eating yeast, which is, I don't know, the marketing needs some work, I think. But yeah, we've got it, but I don't kind of sprinkle it liberally or anything
Yeah,
like that.
I think it. Yeah, I agree. I think it works well if you like mix it into stuff. Like if you're making, I don't know, like a risotto or something, and you want that kind of cheesy flavour and texture, then you can kind of mix it in. You know, and things like breakfast, I always feel for people are probably, if there's someone who has like an oat-based breakfast or a smoothie or something like that, like it's very easy to maybe swap your milk for a nut drink. You could very easily swap your yogurts around. Like you can get obviously like Alpro do a good range of like plant-based yogurts. They do a pretty decent like high protein yogurt as well, which if you're used
Yeah, you get like
to like
10 grams of protein or something per pot. It's decent.
yeah, it's really good. So if you're used to having something like Skyr or the Total Fire Greek yogurt, then you can make that transition. And even like a protein powder. Now, from personal experience, I can't eat milk or dairy or anything, so I have to use a vegan protein powder. And for many years, I don't know what your experience was, but most vegan protein powders taste like dirt.
Yeah, you kind of got to get used to the texture, I guess. So having
Yeah.
something that's kind of grainy that doesn't necessarily mix as well into a drink that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If I don't want to put people off, so it's taken me a couple of years to find like one or two now that I'll go to, and I do actually find that they taste nice on their own, which is great. Or like say you can mix it with a smoothie or with oats or things like that, and that's a really good way to get 20 to 30 grams of protein. Just in case people are interested, Raw Sport do a really good range of plant-based protein powders. A lot of their protein powders are also Informed Sport tested, so I work with people who are like in the military and things like that. They get regularly tested, so they need something that's Informed Sport tested. Or there's a company called Kin Nutrition, KIN. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is really nice kind of protein powder. So yeah, just making kind of simple swaps from meals that you already do, I think is a good starting point for people. It's obviously going to take a little bit of planning and a little bit of research, and you might have to kind of stock up on certain plant-based products in your cupboards. Obviously, sometimes going out and maybe kind of grabbing meals on the go becomes just a little bit more challenging. But again, I think it's just something that you just learn to kind of practice over time. Do you find any challenges when it comes to, you say, if you track your calories, or you're tracking macronutrients, etc.? Anything that you find you're higher or lower on, or any kind of imbalances that you get?
Yeah, so I guess like one really easy way to kind of boost your calorie count is by eating a lot of nuts, right? So I try and get a lot of different nuts and seeds into my diet every day. But obviously that means the fat is obviously pretty high. So it's just trying to find something that's like leaner to really help things. So seitan is kind of like a godsend for me, which is essentially, it sounds disgusting, but it's essentially kind of meat made out of like the protein in wheat. So it's incredibly high in protein and incredibly low in pretty much everything else. So that's a good way to kind of balance out having to eat things that have a lot of carbs or fats in as well.
There's lots of I mean, it must be easier, I think, for someone now to decide to go down a plant-based diet route than it probably was like 3, 4, or 5 years ago. In terms of setting up, if someone's thinking about a bit more plant-based eating, it's going to be naturally higher in carbohydrates and fats than it is in protein, and that's perfectly okay. What we would say for someone who's going to be going plant-based is, drop your protein target down to maybe 20 to 25% of your daily intake. We still want regular feedings throughout the day, but it's just naturally we're not probably going to get close to that 30%, kind of maybe 35% target that a meat eater would have. So like, we need to kind of remove that stress and that pressure straight away. We're going to naturally, let's say, have things like fibrous carbs in your diet, kind of starchy, vegetables, all those kind of things. So we're naturally going to be, maybe 40 to 50% of your diet is going to be carbohydrates. And then the rest, which is maybe like 35% is going to be from your fat. But they still, fats are still great for energy production. They're great for recovery. They're great for health. And again, if we've got, we tend to find as well, if someone starts eating, more plant-based, it's harder to maybe make a meal that's 700 calories. Say if someone's got a higher calorie target, right, I've got to make a meal that's 700 calories. If you have a sirloin steak, that's like 450, 500 calories done straight away. But you can use things like fats very easily. You can use, oils in your cooking to push calories up very, very quickly. And, if we're thinking about from a performance point of view, as you touched on at the start, if we're thinking about functional fitness and workouts and training, a lot of the training that you guys are doing is maybe between kind of 8 to 20 minutes of work, of effort. That's primarily using glycogen as an energy source. We're not endurance athletes here. We're kind of in that aerobic, anaerobic state, and we're using carbs for energy. So if your diet is like 50% carbs, like that's actually really setting you up to perform really well. So that's why we do see, whether it's functional fitness, CrossFit, team sports, people moving into plant-based diet, they do notice an increase in their performance because they're probably eating more carbs and maybe they were overeating on protein as well. Do you in terms of some kind of any other challenges, like in terms of, you say like trying to hit like a calorie number, like just to give people an insight, like what number are you trying to hit, like calories per day, etc.?
So I'm probably aiming for somewhere around 3,500. Mm-hmm. And I just have to kind of eat so regularly that sometimes I feel full, but I just have to kind of keep munching, and then like 2 hours later pick something else up and keep, and I guess like you said, having smoothies and things like that where you're kind of drinking the calories kind of helps hit those targets a bit more. But yeah, just kind of eating for a large portion of the day. I you hear about people that are kind of like intermittent fasting and they only have like a 6-hour window. Mm-hmm. And there's like no way I could be doing that, just because I think I would genuinely be quite sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's for sure the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, smoothies, liquid nutrition is a great way to get 400, 500, 600 calories in very quickly. Also, sometimes with plant-based diet is that obviously the focus becomes, let's say, on plants, and suddenly we've maybe got a lot of fiber in those meals, or they can be quite voluminous, quite kind of big. So again, we kind of feel like we're always eating, we're always kind of grazing. So we'd always sometimes recommend, maybe for people that say we've got a higher calorie target on a plant-based diet, is you're going to be getting enough fiber from probably like your fruits and vegetables and things like that. So something like your rice, rather than maybe have the whole grain rice because you're in that path of like whole grain health, etc. But actually, like white rice is maybe a little bit easier to eat. It's definitely going to be easier to digest. So making some kind of transitions to that, because you're going to get enough fiber everywhere else in your diet as well. So that's something we always sometimes recommend to people is, not every single component of your meal has to be like whole grain, super nutrient dense, because your nutrient density is going to increase anyway going plant-based. So you can have things like white rice, maybe a little bit more, so that, let's say, can absorb quickly and be a little bit easier to eat. Sometimes as well, it can be using plant-based carbs that are really high in protein as well. So rather than having, like a traditional meal where you've got protein, carbs, and veg on your plate, like if you've just got like your carb source that hits your protein target with some veg and a bit of fat, again, it can be a smaller meal physically. So there's lots of like plant-based pastas out there, things like lentil pasta, chickpea pasta, pea pasta, that like a serving of them gives you like 20 grams of protein. Done. Really good. You can also use things potentially like black beans, things like quinoa, even like porridge oats. Like a decent serving of porridge oats might give you 10 or even 15 grams of protein. So you can kind of pull things together very quickly. So it hasn't got to always be like I say, always relying on the tofu and the tempeh and seitan and things like that to hit your protein target.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, right? Like, if you're a meat eater, you have the choice of like everything, and the convenience is definitely there. But I think once you kind of get into the kind of the rhythm of things and get used to knowing kind of what things are maybe a little higher in protein, or you don't necessarily have to focus on certain things, you can kind of dedicate your time somewhere else. And I guess it's just that kind of trade-off of, do you want to spend your time just eating the first thing that you can see, or do you want to spend a bit more time and kind of do a bit more research and kind of see what may actually help you kind of long term?
Yeah. Have you found, in terms of going more plant-based, how have you found like your daily energy, and then also how have you found like your gut health as well, which are two things I think are really important for people, whatever diet they're on?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good segue for me to say that fairly recently I was diagnosed with Crohn's, which, for those of you that don't know, it's a type of inflammatory bowel disease. And so probably asking me about my gut health isn't necessarily representative of people on a plant-based diet, just kind of for medical reasons. But I'd say obviously, like Tom mentioned, you're eating more fiber. And if you're eating like beans in a lot of your meals, then like obviously that's going to make a difference in how you kind of process foods, and it will take you a bit of time to kind of get used to how things work or don't necessarily work as well, or whatever it is. But I think you kind of, I would recommend you give it a bit of time if you're kind of contemplating doing it for your gut to change, maybe like 4 to 6 weeks or something, just so you can kind of see how it changes you. And my energy levels haven't changed as a result of the eating, at least. Sometimes with the Crohn's, I find I'm a little depleted anyway, but that just means usually I have to eat more, I've got to sleep, and kind of listening to your body, I think, is the best thing that you can do, right? Like, you can count your calories all you want, but if you're feeling sluggish, or you struggle to kind of work every day, then you kind of got to look at yourself and kind of see what you actually need by listening to your body. I think that's the kind of best tool that you've really got.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point about overall energy, is that you've still got to make sure that you're eating enough to support your daily activity level and your training. I think as we spoke about, if you've got a steak or a chicken breast, like that might provide like 200 to 400 calories in your meal, and if you replace that with some more beans or lentils or whatever, like maybe great for people who are trying to lose weight, because they're going to maybe eat a little bit less, and that's why they often see results in going vegan or plant-based. But on the other side, if we're trying to, I don't know, you're on your feet all day, you're training hard, you're a bigger frame person who needs 3,500 calories, like you'll soon notice that if you don't hit that number, like the petrol warning light's gonna come on. So I'd say a little bit of planning. You could use obviously something like MyFitnessPal, use a calorie calculator, just so that that to begin with, you're just eating enough. I think that's a really good point to look at, and then you can start to dial in a little bit more, thinking about, right, am I getting enough plant-based protein in? Am I getting it kind of regularly? And I think as soon as you get to that kind of calorie target, you'll say your energy should be pretty good because you're eating enough. But we've always heard feedback from people that when they go plant-based, I think subconsciously, because they kind of clean everything up, I don't really like the term clean, but they do eat better nutrient-dense food. If they eat a 250 calorie snack of fruit and nuts and, I don't know, rather than just a bar, like it's more food, it's more fiber, it's more filling, it's more vitamins and minerals. Like they're going to feel better off that than they would maybe than just having like a protein bar or a Snickers bar or whatever they had before to snack on. And then I think, like I say, just breaking it down and going by small goals. Like the easiest way to transition is just slowly remove some animal-based foods. Maybe keep a little journal, use MyFitnessPal or something, just so that you can, week one, like I say, you may just go, right, I'm just going to change the dairy and the milks I use. May even change, I'm just going to change breakfast, and I'm going to have black coffee, or I'm going to have a plant-based milk with my coffee or something. And then week two, you may then change like your evening meal or something, or you may, I'm going to take eggs out now. Like go step by step, rather than maybe like do a complete overhaul. Like say, right, Monday morning, boom, I'm going plant-based, and like half of your cupboard is still not really set up to support that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess I kind of consider myself kind of fully indoctrinated, I guess, in January, when obviously it was Veganuary every year. So there's companies that kind of try and help you kind of stay on the path of veganism or plant-based nutrition. And for me, that wasn't such a big issue, because I was going from a point where I was almost there to being there. Whereas I guess if you're currently in a kind of really meat-heavy diet, then jumping from 31st of December being 3 meals a day, just smashing that meat, to the next day not having any, and kind of thinking, that's quite a big jump. So it's July now. You got 6 months to kind of whittle your way down, or kind of just see how you feel on that kind of journey, if you are thinking about kind of reducing your kind of meat consumption. And then when it comes to Veganuary, then you've got kind of this whole this kind of support mechanism where there are these organizations and these people that are kind of there to help a bit more than they necessarily would be throughout the rest of the year, or you're feeling a bit more kind of new year, new me, or whatever it is. So I would definitely support the fact that just going from one to the other overnight is that's not going to end well, and you'll have some kind of episode where you'll like go further than you were kind of when you started. So just take it day by day, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I would, like say, pick the meal that's the easiest to change. Like if you have oats or a smoothie for breakfast, like change the milk, change the protein powder, done. Maybe lunch could then be like a vegetarian lunch. Maybe you still might have eggs for lunch, but you might go meatless at lunch. And then maybe your evening meals might still be meat for now, but then you could slowly start to try some alternatives and things like that. That's a protocol we've used with a few people before is they're kind of like, they're vegan at lunch, they're vegetarian they're vegan at breakfast, they're vegetarian at lunch, and they still eat meat in the evening, but they're eating meat then only once a day, and they're slowly transitioning. We've only heard generally positive things of people that have gone plant-based, whether it's their overall energy, whether it's improvement in their gut health because they're eating more fibrous foods or they're eating more quality. We've heard it improve people's sleep and things like this as well. And also from a performance point of view, let's say you can look across the sporting world. You can look at James Newbury in CrossFit. You can look at like Novak Djokovic in tennis, Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, there's lots of people that are plant-based that are very successful. There's people who are not plant-based that are successful as well. It's not just one thing that makes a successful sportsman, but it does show that you can do it. You can perform at a high level. You're not necessarily going to be nutrient deficient or anything like this. Sometimes you hear, someone's vegan and they'll kind of get bashed straight away of, oh, you're not going to get enough protein. Well, you can, you just have to plan around it. And sometimes there'll be an argument about, oh, well, you might be deficient in this and deficient in that. So what we would recommend to people, if they're thinking about going plant-based, is that through us, we partner with a company called Thriver, and they do blood testing. So you get a kit sent to your home, you can have your bloods done, and then you get the results back, and we can see them as well. And you can see exactly where you are. You could then maybe follow a diet for maybe 6 weeks, 12 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, maybe kind of like say 3 to 6 months would be good, and then have your bloods done again. And you can see, any markers, anything that's changed, anything you may need to kind of address with your diet. And commonly we've found that it surprises people that just because someone's a meat eater, actually sometimes they can be deficient in something like B6. And we've had vegans who have blood tested and their B6 is really, really good. So just because you're going down a certain route doesn't always mean you're going to be deficient. You just may have to just be aware of certain things to dial in. But unless sometimes you test, you're not going to know. So that's the only advice we would maybe give to people there.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I take like a weekly vitamin B pill, and that usually sees me good for the rest of the week. I sometimes take vitamin D, but with the dodgy British weather, that's necessarily only subject to vegans. So I'd agree with that. I think touching on what you were saying about role models as well, like traditionally it's been associated with people that are kind of smaller in stature, or their sports. Like Djokovic is obviously an incredible athlete, but he doesn't have the kind of bulk or physique that maybe some people in our space kind of want. So seeing people like James Newbury when he became vegan, and people are thinking like, you're going to lose your gains and you're going to lose so much weight straight away. And to be honest, if you are eating the same like a calorie is a calorie, whether it comes from an animal or it comes from a plant, right?
Yeah.
And so I think seeing these people, like local hero for me, David Hay, the boxer, he's been vegan for something like 3 or 4 years. Granted, he's no longer a professional boxer, I don't think, but he's still massive. And you as you see more and more of these people that are kind of absolutely ripped, especially the guys that are putting some weight on or putting muscle on or whatever it is, I think that's kind of the most inspiring thing for people in this space.
Yeah, like I say, it can be done if someone's got 3,500 calories to eat and or more, like they can do it. They're just, like I say, they've got a plan. And like I say, if anything, it's for people who, if anyone sat there and maybe they struggle with hunger, they struggle with feeling satisfied in meals. Like I know when I eat a bit more plant-based, and you can probably back this up, like you can eat really, really big meals. You can really make your dinners very, very large. And if you're someone who's got a big appetite and struggles to feel full, like having a plant-based meal every other day or something is going to be really, really satisfying for you. So it probably helps those kind of people who have got, let's say, higher calorie targets to eat a bit more plant-based, because your food intake in terms of volume is going to go up, which is great if you like to eat.
Yeah, win-win, right?
Absolutely. So Matt, we're going to wrap that up there. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and having a chat.
Of course.
In terms of, like say, if there's any other kind of questions that people have got, feel free to ping me over an email. For those of you who have obviously seen about our programs and that we offer, we do have vegetarian and vegan kind of options within our coaching programs as well. So, you know, we still cater for them. We still cater with recipe packs and everything like that. We get more and more people coming on board. So if it's something that you think, oh, just because I'm a vegan or a veggie, like I can't do well at functional fitness, you're wrong. If anything, you're going to be able to eat more carbs and perform even better. So if it's something you're interested in, again, please drop us an email, please reach out. If you're interested in having blood testing done as well, please drop me an email and we can get that set up for you. Email is tom@phnutrition.co.uk. Matt, anything else to add, or you're good?
I guess just, you know, if anyone wants to kind of talk more, just kind of informally before they go to you guys, then I'm kind of always there to kind of, you know, if you're having questions about like suggestions or recommendations or anything like that, then yeah, feel free to reach out.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
And then sign up to PH Nutrition.
Super. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you guys soon.